Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress. I'll be your host for the next hour. My pleasure to be here this morning, and thanks for tuning in. We're continuing our reading and discussion of the book The Vatican Billions by Avro Manhattan. Very revealing book about the materialistic nature, the love of money, the love of mammon of the Roman Catholic Church. Telling the truth never told about the Roman Catholic Church. This book by Avro Manhattan, a Knight of Malta, a very knowledgeable person about Vatican history, and this is a very important lesson for my listeners, and I hope you appreciate this book. Yesterday we ended with our discussion, continuing a discussion about the fall of Michele Sindano, the Vatican's banker, and continuing where we left off yesterday, it says, the ominous warnings of the oncoming new scandal were already there for all to see. In 1980 and 1981, following additional investigations into the Sindona aftermath, the top senior executive of the IOR, that is the Vatican Bank, and his successor, were arrested. The following year, July 1982, Sindona, although serving his 25 years in an American jail, was indicted once again about another case of bankruptcy. 25 other persons, including an officer of the Vatican Bank, were accused of fraudulence, bankruptcy, and falsification of company figures. El Menini, the highest top official of the Vatican Bank, and second in command only to Archbishop Marcinkus and to Pope John Paul II, was also indicted. The trial was set for 1983. Pope Paul VI's very own financial little fox, Michele Sindona, had not only been abandoned by the Vatican, which he had served so well, he had been caught by the hounds of the law, which, thanks also to the ambivalent protections of the Roman Catholic Church and Freemasonry, he had so dexterously outsmarted for so long. So everybody wants to shy away, particularly the Pope and the Vatican wants to shy away from this little fox of Pope Paul VI, Michele Sindona. Banking scandals, and we're going to continue our study and understanding about these banking scandals in Chapter 30 of the book, which is entitled God's Banker, Lodge P2, and the Vatican. The author writes, Freemasonry to the Catholic Church had always been one of the greatest aberrations of society, worse than atheism or Bolshevism. Catholics were forbidden to sympathize, support, or join it in any way or form. Had they done so, they were ipso facto excommunicated. And to a Roman Catholic Church, I'll just add, that means eternal damnation. If you're separated from the Church through excommunication, if you're not restored to the Church before you die, you are damned. Now, that is the threat that was posed by the Vatican against Roman Catholics joining Freemasonry. But we're going to find something entirely startling and contradictory about this, as we already have in this book. The close relationship between the universal church, the Roman Catholic Church, and one of her sisters, one of her daughters, possibly might one say, of Freemasonry. And we're going to find out who runs Freemasonry and why it's not extraordinary at all that the Roman Catholic Church would be in bed together with Freemasonry. It says, Freemasonry to the Catholic Church had always been one of the greatest aberrations of society, worse than atheism or Bolshevism. Catholics were forbidden to sympathize, support, or join it in any way. Had they done so, they were ipso facto excommunicated. Papal fulminations had seen to it that the prohibition was maintained. Punishment to any Roman Catholic who disobeyed was precise: exclusion from the communion of the Church here on earth and hell in the next world. Then one day in 1974, the Vatican dropped a bombshell. It gave official permission for Roman Catholics to join a Masonic lodge, in particular cases, that is. The permission was used in certain quarters in Italy, Switzerland, and in the United States of America, or rather, it had already been used by Catholics prior to the official permission, simply because many of them had been dealing with sundry financial affairs of the Vatican Bank. So there's been a long history of an association between the Roman Catholic Church, particularly the Vatican Bank, and Freemasonry, and we're going to continue now. It says the Vatican's curious liberalization could never have occurred had it not been for the discovery of the body of a Lugano banking executive across the rails of a Swiss railway, as already mentioned. The man, employed by the Banco di Roma per la Svizzera, had illegally gambled with the bank's funds, it was said, with the loss of millions of Swiss francs. At first, the official version that he had committed suicide was accepted. Then, however, it was noticed how the Banco di Roma per la Svizzera seemed to have lost the $50 million for someone else. That is, for the Vatican Bank. The IOR, it came out, that is, the Vatican Bank, it was discovered, had a 51% control of the Banco di Roma itself. Hence, its million losses. And even more interesting, it had, even if tangentially, financial connections with Sindona's Franklin Bank. When Sindona's empire collapsed in 1974, the IOR, the Vatican Bank, although losing its chief financial wizard, had already replaced him with another, no less able advisor. The Sindona's successor had been discovered by Sindona himself. He had found him operating as a junior employee in a sedate provincial private bank in 1969, the Banco Ambrosiano, patronized by the Archbishop of Milan, northern Italy. The master and his pupil, one Roberto Calvi as he's called mostly, formed a working alliance with the result that as early as 1971, they had already set up a financial entity outside Italy, the Banco Ambrosiano overseas in Nassau. Sindona, by then at the top of his financial career, introduced Calvi to Bishop Marcinkus, who had been the head of the Vatican Bank since 1969. Both asked Marcinkus to operate with them via the Banco Ambrosiano. So here you have a menage a trois with Bishop Marcinkus and Calvi and Sindona. We're going to see how this tete-a-tete complicated matters for the Vatican. And it says the bishop accepted. Bishop Marcinkus accepted this arrangement and was listed as one of its directors. Now, subsequently, as the overseas operations of the Banco Ambrosiano, and hence of the IOR, the Vatican Bank, expanded, their financial ramifications embraced several other overseas concerns. Within a few years, the IOR had come to control, indeed to own, as the London Financial Times later was to report, 7 Panamanian banks. From 1971, when Calvi began to operate under Sindona's protection and the blessing of Bishop Marcinkus, his career became unstoppable. He was promoted first to managing director and then to the president of the Banco Ambrosiano. His rapid climb was due not only to his abilities, but also to Sindona's financial propping him up. As early as 1970, in fact, Sindona had given Calvi, and it was said also to Marcinkus, no less than $6 million for combined operations. Whether this was true or not was never proved, although years later, in 1982, Marcinkus and several other high officials of the IOR were accused of dubious financial improprieties in connection with Sindona's operations carried out before 1974. Sindona's downfall gave Calvi the chance to emerge as a bright, ascending financial star, not only in the banking firmament of Italy, but also in that of the Catholic world. From then onward, in fact, the Banco Ambrosiano, already patronized by the Archbishop of Milan, started to control subsidiary Catholic financial concerns, such as the Banca Cattolica del Veneto and other minor Catholic subsidiaries. The Banco Ambrosiano's expansion became even more rapid owing to its characteristic religious orientation. We're going to see a bit of a switch here. It says would-be investors had to prove to Calvi's satisfaction that they had been baptized, and you must know that this means they had to be baptized into the Roman Catholic Church. Now it says this they did by showing their baptismal certificate. That's right, every Roman Catholic is given a baptismal certificate. That's how our government in the military knows the difference between the Catholic military and the non-Catholic military, simply by baptismal records. Every Roman Catholic, it used to be, had to be stamped on their dog tags whether they were Catholic or not, so that the Army could make sure that there was a priest there to give him last rites if he was mortally wounded. So you better believe our government knows who is Catholic and who isn't in this country, and that's true all over the world. Now, after that little aside there for our education, it continues also, these investors, also that they were practicing Catholics. In other words, they had to be good little Catholics. They had to go to church. They had to go to Mass. They had to confess their sins. Okay? This is carefully handpicking the investors by Roberto Calvi of only practicing Catholics. I got to ask you the question. Just suppose in your mind that the United States of America ever becomes officially Catholic. It already is Catholic, but when it becomes officially Catholic, do you suppose that your religious faith might have anything to do with whether or not you can invest or whether or not you can take out a loan? The Bible plainly tells us that in the end we won't be able to buy or sell unless we have the number of the beast. Okay? Now it continues, he says, this they did by showing their baptismal certificate, also that they were practicing Catholics. Failing that, they were excluded on the grounds of their non-Catholicity. Religious discrimination in this banking endeavor by Calvi. And it says the president always closed the proceedings of every major financial operation and each meeting with the motto, "Praise be to God." What little God are they worshiping? The God of the Pope. Now, the reputation for piety and financial brilliance soon put the Ambrosiano on the map. Its ever closer relationship with the Vatican did the rest. Calvi's limitless energy began to impress men and institutions alike. The media, who had tended to ignore him, now became enthusiastic. So much so that it dubbed Calvi God's banker. That's right, the press dubbed Calvi God's banker. He's the Pope's banker. And it says they gave him the nickname not so much because of his ever more close relationship with the IOR and Bishop Marcinkus, but also because his operations seemed to reach every nook and cranny of the financial field in which the Vatican was active. In other words, everywhere, right? Now, Calvi's influence, however, besides deriving from his Vatican connections, came also from another additional source of power, from Freemasonry, or rather from a peculiar kind of Freemasonry known as P2 Lodge. And I assert that it's not so peculiar, but we'll continue anyway. It says the P2 Lodge was regarded as a distortion of true Freemasonry, formed, as it was said, to provide clandestine stepping stones to political power for its members. Its objective was also the shaping of financial matters in Italy, abroad, and even inside the Vatican itself. That's right, Freemasonry, shaping the financial matters of the Vatican. And it says Roberto Calvi and his associates, while quizzing any would-be investors about their Catholicity, by exercising the quote-unquote acceptance clause, however, at the same time took part in Masonic ceremonies, which theoretically were against the Church's regulations. Now let me stop and make a comment here. We find it strange in this book that there's a cooperation, a partnership between the Vatican's banking operations and Freemasonry as some aberration. But that's not unusual at all. And first of all, we have to understand that Freemasonry is run by the Jesuit order. Freemasonry is just an auxiliary to the Jesuit order. It's used by the Jesuit order. Now, most Freemasons are not aware of this. If they were aware of it, some might leave the organization. But it's better to leave them ignorant and in the bottom echelons of Freemasonry so that they will provide the charitable and benevolent public figure of Freemasonry. It's public relations. It's what the bottom levels of Freemasonry are all about. That's why nobody as a general, Tom, Dick, and Harry walking up and down the street, nobody would suspect that Freemasonry is involved in some of the most diabolical intrigue in the planet, and particularly that related to the Vatican. It's because of this charitable, benevolent, public figure, this public relations that is established by the lower levels of Freemasonry. But at the top, their hands are into everything. And now we see a partnership clearly established between the Roman Catholic Church and Freemasonry. It's simply the Jesuits' way of using Protestants to achieve Jesuit goals in the world. Now, I'm going to talk about this more on the program in future editions of Inquisition Update. I'm going to invite guests to come in and speak about it. I hope Chris Pinto will come and talk to us about it, and he'll show us more clearly this long-held association between the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church and the hierarchy of Freemasonry. It's stunning information, and if you don't know it, you're certainly not going to want to miss those programs. But suffice it for now to say that there is a link, and not only is the Vatican allowing this to take place, they're partners. Now, let me explain to you why it is so compatible for the Roman Catholic Church and Freemasonry to be in the same bed together. The Roman Catholic Church is regarded as the universal church. And if you investigate Catholicism, as I have, in studying their books, and particularly as we've related in P.D. Stewart's book, Code Word Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church is called the universal church because it is an eclectic mix of all the pagan religions. Okay, it is a religion that will appeal to all religions. And this we saw at John Paul II in his meeting in Assisi in, I believe, 1986 with all the religious leaders of the world, declaring a global religion. Now that's just the the adult form of this Unitarian or this universal church that the papacy has really always been about. Now, it is regarded as a Catholic church or a Christian church by those who don't know this information. And I've said always on this program that eventually I expect the Roman Catholic Church, its hierarchy, to renounce Christ altogether. And it is plainly obvious to anybody who's studied this, even superficially, that the papacy claims to be the replacement of Christ on earth. Now, what can that be but a full repudiation of Christ himself? To say that you've replaced Christ on the earth? To those who don't pay attention, for the Pope to call himself the Vicar of Christ means one thing, but those who actually study what is meant by the term Vicar of Christ, you understand that it is a complete repudiation of Christ and a replacement with the Pope. Now after the meeting of all the religious leaders of the world in 1986 in Assisi, they declared the papacy the universal patriarch of all religions, in a sense. That he was the spiritual leader of the world. And that's how the papacy has always seen itself. Now, how does that connect with Freemasonry? Freemasonry is also a universal religion. If you know anything about Freemasonry and have studied it like I have, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I know a good deal, it too is a universal religion. The only requirement for you to be a Freemason is that you believe in a supreme being. He can be Mickey Mouse if you want him to be. They call the God of Freemasonry a vanilla term, the great architect of the universe. They don't give him a name because you can worship any god in the Freemasonic Lodge. And in the Freemasonic Lodge, all religions are equal as viable pathways to that, glorious lodge in the sky, as it were. It's universalism. And when you get right down to it, it's Luciferianism. It's Satanism. If it doesn't worship the God of glory according to his commandments, then it is a satanic aberration. Well, that's precisely what the Roman Catholic Church is. And once we understand this, then we can understand that it's not an aberration at all, that Freemasonry is busy in bed with the whore of Rome and is actually her bankers. Okay? Now, whether or not the current author of this book, Avro Manhattan, realizes this, he's certainly not articulating it in this book. From his point of view, it is seen as hypocrisy for the Roman Catholic Church to have anything to do with Freemasonry. I don't see it as hypocrisy at all. They're one and the same. They're all cut from the same cloth. They all worship a universal God, not the Creator. There's only one type in all the world that's not welcome in the Roman Catholic Church or the Universal Church or Freemasonry, and that is the one who holds to the gospel of Jesus Christ and his truth. We're not going to be welcome anywhere in the world, such as history has already revealed. I want to make an addendum to the points that I was making just prior to the break, and that is that Catholicism and Freemasonry could both legitimately be regarded as universal religion. Okay? Now, in addition to that, we have read the book, the Babylon Mystery Religion by Ralph Woodrow, that clearly demonstrates the Babylonian roots of the Roman Catholic Church. It started at the Tower of Babel. Okay? We have the same beginnings, the same genesis in Babel with Freemasonry. And that's not even denied in official Freemasonic books. So they are truly cut from the same stone. The tower that Nimrod built they have their roots in ancient Babylon. They're both esoteric religions. The Roman Catholic Church patterns itself after the esoteric pattern that we find in official Freemasonic manuals. If you look at the vestments of the Roman Catholic Church, if you look at their ceremony, their pomp and rituals, you'll find their roots in Babylon, as we saw in the book Babylon Mystery Religion by Ralph Woodrow, and also another book that we haven't gotten to yet here on Inquisition Update. That is The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. And if any of my listeners have already read that book, you can verify. As a matter of fact, in the book that we did read here on the program, as I've mentioned already, Babylon Mystery Religions, one of the works most cited in that book is The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. And the common roots of Roman Catholicism and Freemasonry find their origin in ancient Babylon. That's why she's called in the Bible Babylon the Great. Babylon the Great. And the Bible, contrary to most people's understanding, the Bible refers to Freemasonry. The Bible calls Freemasons the builders. Okay? And isn't that what Freemasonry claims to be all about? Building? What are they building? A universal government, a universal religion. And Jesus, our Savior, the creator of all heaven and earth, refers to himself as a stone, doesn't he? In Daniel chapter 2. At the end of Daniel chapter 2, we find the stone that was cut out without hands strikes the image in the feet. Now that image represents all the governments of the world from the time of Babylon until the time of Christ's return. And that stone strikes that image in the feet and grinds it all to powder. And the only interpretation you can come to with that is that all the governments of the earth will be destroyed. There'll be no remnant left of them. And then that stone that was cut out of the mountains that struck the image in the feet will become a great mountain. That's the government of God. That is the kingdom of Christ. That is what we hope to be a part of. It's not an earthly kingdom. It's a heavenly kingdom. But Freemasonry and the Roman Catholic Church together are trying to build an earthly kingdom. And it is the kingdom that the Bible says rejected the stone. It says the stone that the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. Freemasonry and Catholicism together have rejected that stone. The Bible says it. I believe it. And not only that, but I see it with my own two eyes. The stone that the builders, the stone that the Freemasons, the stone that the Roman Catholic Church, the stone that the Pope rejected by calling himself the replacement of Christ on earth, is that stone, Christ. He is the stone that the builders rejected. Now, have I clearly painted the virtual mirror image between the Roman Catholic Church and Freemasonry? We're going to see more as we continue in this book. Now, continuing, it says, oh, and by the way, before I even get started, I want to remind you as a program note, tomorrow, Ken Bearchief will be on the program, Lord willing, if nothing happens. He's scheduled to be here tomorrow to update us on the latest happenings associated with the priest pedophile scandal in the Northwest Jesuit province. And I'm interested to hear what Ken Bearchief has to say, and I'm sure you are too. So stay tuned for tomorrow. Ken Bearchief will join us from Tamaki Law. Now, back to the book. Avro Manhattan says, Calvi's influence, however, besides deriving from his Vatican connections, came also from another additional source of power, from Freemasonry, or rather, from a peculiar kind of Freemasonry, I say not so peculiar, known as P2 Lodge. The P2 Lodge was regarded as a distortion of true Freemasonry, formed, it was said, to provide clandestine stepping stones to political power for its members. Its objective was also the shaping of financial matters in Italy, abroad, and even inside the Vatican itself. Now, Roberto Calvi and his associates, while quizzing any would-be investors about their Catholicity, by exercising the quote-unquote acceptance clause, however, at the same time, took part in Masonic ceremonies, which theoretically were against the Church's regulations. Theoretically is the key word. Look, there's no difference between Freemasonry and the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. Now it says, as a P2 Mason, he had to take secret vows of loyalty to the lodge. Okay, a lodge that is run by the Jesuit order. And it says the ceremony was carried out with the candidates dressed up in black robes and black hoods like friars. That's right. Now, who do you know that has a black robe and a black hood? Is it not speaking of the Jesuits? Here's your connection, just as visible in their rituals, their connection between the black friars. That's what the Jesuits are known as, the Black Friars. They even wear the Black Friars' hoods and robes during their initiations. Now, it says from then on, the new members called themselves the quote-unquote fratelli, that is, brothers. Masons in Italian derives from the word masso, M-A-S-S-O, the word for brick. The brick assuming a ritual significance in any Masonic ceremony. It's a man-made stone, isn't it? The brick, a man-made stone. Not a one cut out of the mountain without hands, is it? No, they've rejected that stone and they've made their own. And who is that brick? The one you see on the back of your dollar bill. The one that's represented by the all-seeing eye. He is the replacement of the stone that the builders rejected. He's represented here by a brick, a man-made stone. He's not made by God. He's a counterfeit. He's the Pope of Rome. Now, among the leading figures of P2 Lodge's 933 names, pretty good-sized lodge, isn't it? 933 members to the P2 Lodge. It says, among the leading figures of P2 Lodge's 933 names was Licio Gelli, who served as a Grand Master of the P2 U Ortolani, with vast banking interests in Latin America, Roberto Calvi, and last, and by no means least, his mentor, Michele Sindano. The lodge, or rather the fratelli, the Black Friars, the brothers, the Jesuits, running Freemasonry, controlled the members. Now, I got to tell you, when the Jesuits are in power, they control you. They are required to act as a cadaver, to be moved about at the will of the Jesuit general, to be like a stick in the hand of an old man with no thought or will of their own. And let me tell you, this Masonic Lodge operated the same way, as we're going to see. They follow the pattern of the Jesuits. It says it sponsored them in politics and in finance. In Calvi's case, they aided his meteoric career in the banking world. It was convenient to have a quote-unquote brother, a black friar, on the highest financial pinnacle who could help them with their recondite activities in national and international operations. As a result, the Banco Ambrosiano, with its close financial relationship with the Vatican, in due course became the de facto lay bank of the IOR itself, a kind of secular equivalent, or rather lay transmitter, whose funds were put at its disposal for finalizing operations which could bypass monetary control without detection. Okay? The clandestine bank operating under illegal operations. And they cloaked their operations, as we're going to see now. It says the riddle of practicing Catholics having become Freemasons in the P2 Lodge, when seen in such light, therefore, was another additional proof of the interrelationship of the Vatican's financial involvement with forces operating at different levels within and outside the Church. The stunning public concession of the Vatican permitting Catholics to become members of Freemasonry derived directly from it. Hence, the participation of the Vatican Bank in the activities, even if by remote control, of the P2 Lodge. When, therefore, Sindona's Banca Privata Italiana collapsed, Calvi, a member of the P2 Lodge, as was his patron Sindona, commenced his meteoric rise, propelled simultaneously by the powerful secretive influence of the P2 Lodge and of the Vatican. The double protection gave Calvi vigorous connections in both the Roman Catholic and the Masonic worlds. They're not separate worlds. They only appear to be. Now, these in turn put him in touch with the banking and financial community. The result was the rapid purchase of outlandish banking subsidiaries in Panama, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and other Central American shell companies, secret companies, covering up. Now, it says their purchase and their equivocal activities aroused the suspicion of more traditional bankers. The general apprehension about Calvi did the rest. The Bank of Italy, which had been following his wheeling and dealing, ordered him to systemize his sundry operations and put the lot under one single umbrella, that of the Banco Ambrosiano. When finally, in 1978, as a result of general incertitude, the Bank of Italy arranged a general audit of Calvi's operations, they noticed that the Ambrosiano subsidiaries were, quote, running all types of operations outside their control, unquote. Okay? This Bank Ambrosiano and all of its subsidiaries were running operations that were outside the control of the Bank of Italy, of the Italian government. Now it says, but even more ominous, that the Ambrosiano's holdings could not be separated from the Vatican's holdings because of the complex interlocking financial ramifications between the two. In addition, they discovered a very intriguing connection with the old Sindona collapsed empire. From these it appeared that a certain American bishop and a certain Milanese banker had received substantial bribes when dealing with the Banco Ambrosiano and other Catholic banks, as already mentioned. Between 1978 and 1979, and again in 1981, the Ambrosiano and its subsidiaries raised yet another large amount of money, about $1.2 billion with a B dollars. Various banks lent at least $800 million to its quote-unquote shell companies, which Calvi had set up in Liechtenstein, Panama, and Luxembourg. The shell subsidiaries, meanwhile, had used $400 million to buy stock in the Ambrosiano and other Catholic securities, in addition to which another $400 million appeared to have been siphoned through these same agencies to finance shady Latin American deals, many of which were used to sustain politically committed investments. So they were manipulating politics in Central America. And we may touch on that before this book is over. Now, in July of 1981, Calvi and some of his friends were charged with illegally exporting $26 million from Italy during 75 and 76. Calvi was found guilty, fined a total of $11 million and sentenced to 4 years in jail. All right, already Sindona's protege is in trouble, saddled with $11 million in fines and 4-year jail sentence. And the corruption just going to get worse and worse as we go. It says the headquarters of the Masonic Lodge P2 was raided and names of its members made public. Guess what they found, I'll just add? Many cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church were members of this P2 Lodge. And it says the discovery that many of the quote-unquote brothers, the Black Friars, belonged to the highest strata of the political and financial circles created such a crisis that it toppled the government of Italy. So they found some of the most prestigious names in Italy, in Italy's own government. All right, the affair compelled the P2 Grand Master to go into hiding. So Licio Gelli had to beat feet for cover. And it says, notwithstanding the P2 debacle, however, Calvi, after his sentence having been released on bail pending an appeal, reactivated his sundry operations. He set up new financial concerns in Buenos Aires, Managua, Montevideo, and Lima. Rumors had it that this was done with the full cooperation of various quote-unquote brothers, Black Friars of the P2 Lodge, and of the Vatican, as Michel Sindona asserted afterwards from his U.S. jail. Okay, these operations, directed at postponing the impending disaster, in other words, full disclosure of all this intrigue, in all probability accelerated the impetus of what was bound to come. Creditors from dozens of banks in Europe and in the United States pressed for repayment. Calvi asked the IOR, the Vatican Bank, to help, and told the Vatican Bank to pay the debts incurred by the quote-unquote shell companies abroad. The Vatican Bank, however, would not or could not produce the missing millions. Nevertheless, to prove that it was willing to aid him, Archbishop Marcinkus supplied Calvi, on behalf of the IOR, the Vatican Bank, with extraordinary documents. These were called comfort letters. Comfort letters were nothing new in themselves, since they had been accepted as a standard practice by the international financial community. And here we have a facsimile of such a comfort letter in the book, and I can't read it because it's in Italian, but it continues now, just talking about this facsimile. Says facsimile of a letter of comfort issued by the IOR, the Vatican Bank, on behalf of the Banco Ambrosiano, years before the Ambrosiano IOR scandal exploded in the summer of 1982. The scandal was brought to light by the quote-unquote suicide, no suicide involved, but that's what it was called, suicide of the Ambrosiano director Roberto Calvi under, get this, Blackfriars Bridge in London, England. Okay? They called it a suicide, but it was a highly orchestrated assassination, and they made it a point to make sure that everybody knew who killed Roberto Calvi. But only those in the know knew. All right? We'll explain this further as we continue in the book. But they killed him, and they hung him under, quote-unquote, Blackfriars Bridge in London, England. But that's not all. It gets even more complicated than this. It says, the above letter, this comfort letter, was issued as early as January of 1975, less than 1 year after Sindona's collapse. Similar letters helped to accelerate the inevitable Ambrosiano disaster. When the IOR refused to reissue any more such letters, the chain reaction was triggered, which ended with the massive Ambrosiano IOR disaster. Because of such acceptance, comfort letters were regarded as the guarantors of utmost financial reliability, as reliable as those who wrote them. By issuing such letters, the Vatican had assured the creditors of the credit worthiness of the Ambrosiano shell companies. It implied a moral obligation concerning the debts in question. It meant also that Archbishop Marcinkus took full responsibility for them. 5 days before, Calvi had addressed the IOR with a document of his own. This was called a liberating letter. Okay, we have letters of comfort, and now we're talking about liberating letters. The liberating letter, in effect, negates the letters of comfort. That is, it relieved the Vatican of any responsibility for the companies involved. So Calvi's trying to get the Vatican out of hot water on this deal, right? It says the letter was never made known to the Latin American banks of the Ambrosiano, which lent the money to Calvi's shell firms. The arrangement between Calvi and the Vatican Bank, in short, was a deliberate conspiracy to withhold fundamental data from the principal lending banks. Later, the Vatican denied having anything to do with the shell companies, disclaiming any responsibility for the lost $1 billion loan. This it did even after the Italian government insisted that the IOR connections with the Ambrosiano proved otherwise. Reports that the Vatican Bank controlled and indeed even owned, even if tangentially, at least 10 of these shell agencies were vehemently denied as false rumors. The comfort letters of Archbishop Marcinkus and the liberating letters of Calvi brought a transient confidence to both the Ambrosiano and the IOR. Outside them, however, the storm was gathering momentum. Since the fact that the shell subsidiary still owned the Ambrosiano about about $1.2 billion, and $800 million which they had borrowed, plus the $400 million in interest, was there for all to see. The stark reality would not go away. As the pressure mounted hourly, Calvi approached Bishop Marcinkus once more to renew his letters. Marcinkus refused on the grounds that he could not, quote-unquote, compromise the IOR, the Vatican Bank. The Bank of Italy, meanwhile, in other words, Calvi's getting the stiff from the Vatican, okay? And it says the Vatican is refusing to accept their responsibility in this, which is not atypical at all. Now, the Bank of Italy, meanwhile, had renewed her request for more information on the Ambrosiano's groups of foreign subsidiaries. On May 31st, 1982, it declared it wanted precise data about the $1.4 billion of loans. Soon afterwards, Archbishop Marcinkus, after consulting with the Pope, unexpectedly resigned from the board of the Nassau agency, which held the key to all the other loans. The resignation accelerated the already growing panic amidst the financial community all over Europe. Dozens of reputable banks, which had lent money, starting with the Midland Bank of England, threatened to call in the very large loans it had made to the Ambrosiano.